Okay, hello students. This is Kinship Diagrams 101. As you can see from the little front page here, I've got the camera turned down toward the desk today because I'm going to be drawing some pictures for you, similar to the ones that you've seen on my online lectures that are posted from my classroom last year. This is just going to be more condensed and more clear maybe and up close, so that you're going to be able to understand how we put these kinship symbols together into diagrams and how we interpret those diagrams once they're put together. Because for Project 4 that's coming up within the next couple of weeks, you're going to have to use the kinship symbols that are found in a PDF file on your Blackboard course shell. You're going to have to use those kinship symbols, and these are the ones that I'm talking about. Let me slide this in here really quick. This is the file that you're going to find in your Blackboard shell. So all of these are the kinship symbols that you need to know. It's not a comprehensive list of kinship symbols, but this is what an anthropologist uses, a cultural anthropologist uses, when we're in the field doing participant observation. This is how we figure out how a person is related to, or in this specific case, a particular type of relationship called kinship in relationship to other people in the group. So ego, the square symbol here, is the person that the kinship diagram focuses on, and all of the males and females that ego is kin to are represented by a triangle for male or a circle for female. So you've seen this on the lectures online already. You see the marriage symbol. Here's how you show a male offspring compared to a female offspring. That straight line down would come out of that marriage or sexual union symbol. In most cases, not all, but in most cases, if there's multiple children that have been produced from a sexual union, you show siblings like this. You could have as many little offshoots from that vertical downward line. You could have as many offshoots as you need to show as many siblings as necessary. That particular example shows 3 offspring, 3 full siblings. This is how you do a divorce or a dissolved union and a deceased person. So these are the basic ones that you're going to need in order to be able to finish your kinship project, Project 4. Okay, so I want to show you how to put some of these together and what it'll look like, and how to interpret what these symbols mean when they're all stuck together, in a diagram. So I'm going to use a TV family that I know very well from growing up. I'm probably dating myself a lot, but I think a lot of you are going to know who the Brady Bunch is. And so I'm going to use the Brady Bunch because they are a blended family. That's one of our vocabulary words in Chapter 9, the Kinship Chapter. Anyway, the Brady Bunch is a blended family, and you've got Mike and Carol Brady, and they were both married before they married each other, and they had children from those previous marriages. And so I'm going to show you how to draw what their family looks like based on these kinship diagrams. Okay, or these kinship symbols. Okay, so let's see. Here is Mike Brady, a male, and of course he and Carol are married. There's Carol. Now, it's typical that the husband would go on the left and the wife would go on the right. But if it's inconvenient for neatness sake or clarity's sake for you to do that, it's not a hard and fast rule, but in general, the male should go on the left and the female should go on the right in a sexual union. In this case, we're going to have, we've got Mike and we've got Carol depicted that way, but in order to show their previous marriages, we're going to have the husbands and wives out of order here, because we can show their previous marriages alongside with what we've just drawn. So for instance, we know that Mike had a previous marriage. Here it is. And Mike's previous marriage ended in a divorce. So that's how you would show that. I think the storyline went that Carol's previous marriage ended in a divorce also, but instead what I'm going to do is have her previous marriage end in her husband being deceased. And so that's how you would show that. So, the way you would interpret this, I mean, nothing about this picture yet indicates that it's Mike and Carol Brady that we're talking about, because we don't see the rest of their family depicted. But the way you would interpret this picture is that these two people are currently married, but that these two people also had previous marriages. This marriage ended in a divorce, whereas this marriage never ended with a divorce. It ended with the person dying. So we've got a deceased husband, which made Carol a widow, and we've got a divorce here, which made him a divorcee, and they married. Okay, so far we've got one generation of people. Typically the husband goes on the left and the wife on the right, and everybody in this line should be assumed to be relatively the same generation of people. Now we know from the story of the Bradys that they have children that they brought into the household from previous marriages. So Mike Brady had 3 boys, right? So let's draw this picture like this. There's the little offspring picture, and there are the 3 boys. We know that Greg is the oldest, Peter, and Bobby. So typically what you do for relative age of the people in each generation is you put the eldest on the left, and it gets younger as you go toward the right. You would do that whenever convenient for clarity's sake, but if you needed to move the siblings out of order if it was necessary to do that to just make a neater presentation of additional marriages and offspring or something, grandchildren or something, then that would be absolutely fine. Okay, so let's see. So we know that those are the boys that Mike Brady had, and here are the girls that Carol Brady had. There we go. Okay, and so there's Marcia, Jan, and Cindy, and this is how the Brady Bunch family looked. Now, of course, if you know the story at all, Alice was part of the household, but she was not part of the kinship group, right? So Alice was related to the Bradys based on the fact that they were her employer and her friend, or friends. But she was not part of the kin group, so you don't draw Alice in this picture. You just draw the people who are step siblings to each other, step parents to the children, married to each other, exes, or deceased individuals. Now, for instance, what would it look like if Cindy got married and had children of her own? You would simply show the marriage symbol, the individual, and how many children do you want Cindy to have? Let's give her 3 also, boys this time. There we go. So now I'm showing you 3 generations of a family. We started out with the traditional, blended family that the Brady Bunch had on TV, and we've married one of the daughters. The youngest daughter is now married with 3 sons. And we would assume, by the way this is drawn, that this is the oldest son, the middle son, and the youngest son, because that's how you should interpret it. So we've got 3 generations. Each generation is on the same line. That does not mean that all of these people are the same age. They're just the same relative age. They're in the same generation. So, for instance, if this is Greg and this is Marcia, if you remember from the show, those 2 children were roughly the same age, and Peter and Jan were roughly the same age, and Bobby and Cindy were roughly the same age in the story. But you wouldn't need to overlap this and show Marcia here really close to Greg and Jan here really close to Peter. You wouldn't need to do that at all. You could explain, for instance, if their ages were important, to note that Greg and Marcia were relatively the same age, then you would just note that in your handwritten comments that you would make when you're describing this family for yourself. So, some of you have some much more complicated situations than this in your own families, maybe more than two marriages, maybe more than two marriages that produced step siblings, for instance. So what if, for instance, Mike and Carol Brady had a child of their own after they were married? Well, then you would simply draw the child right there in the same generation as the other children. And now the way you would interpret this picture is that Mike and Carol Brady are married, they produced an offspring, but prior to their marriage, he produced these offspring with this woman, and she produced these offspring with this man. So, it can get a lot more complicated, and I already knew where I needed to place all of these symbols and how far apart I needed to have all these symbols on this piece of paper before I started drawing them, because I knew what kinds of relationships I was going to put in there. If you are going to be drawing your own family or a TV family like The Full House or something, or That's So Raven, or any of the TV shows that you are familiar with, you would need to practice a lot before you actually put pen on paper with your final diagram. You're going to have several drafts of this, in other words, just to make sure that you can plan ahead and know how much space you have to, provide for all of these relationships. For instance, if I had planned on giving Jan the husband instead of Cindy, I would have needed a lot more space between Jan and Cindy here so that I could neatly show you how that would look and what would happen. You would simply just put the marriage symbol with the individual she married right in there in between those two siblings. This bracket symbol would indicate that they were still siblings, however this middle sibling was married, for instance. So so there's a lot of planning that you have to do before you get your final draft of what a complicated kinship diagram might look like, and I know that a lot of us out there have a lot of complicated relationships in our blood and marriage lines. So these kinship diagrams show blood and marriage lines, and you're going to have to be able to interpret some of the pictures and finish some unfinished pictures, and also draw some pictures of your own from scratch with a description, a word problem, so to speak, of describing a family with the different marriage and bloodline relationships in it. So I hope this helped. Text me with questions.